Welcome back to Spotlight. I'm very pleased to have Commissioner Michael Matthews with me this evening. Commissioner, welcome to Spotlight.
Thank you very much, Ajit. It's very kind to invite me here tonight.
Great. Well, how long have you been here now?
Just over 4 months in office.
Geez, been that long already.
It feels longer.
So how you finding the place? How you finding the job?
Well, it hasn't been without its challenges in the first 4 months, I must admit that. And of course, as I think your previous speaker was saying, you can't please everybody. But certainly I found it a fascinating place to work. I've been given an extremely warm welcome by the good people here, and it's prompted me to want to stay and do as much as I can to support policing.
Okay, that's great. What prompted you to take this job? I mean, you were in Greece?
I was working in Cyprus actually prior to this. I was working with the Ministry of Defence, the UK's Ministry of Defence in Cyprus. They have military bases there, and I was the head of the police service there. And I'd been there about 3.5 years, and we were looking to extend our time there when this job came up. It was advertised, and it was drawn to my attention. And to my shame, I'd never been to the British Virgin Islands, but some good research on the internet told me that this might be the next big challenge. So not feeling I was ready to hang up my truncheon and whistle yet, I thought it's time to move on and try something different.
Okay, well that's interesting story. And recently you had a road safety initiative. That seems to be something that you're interested in.
Yes, well I came here and one of the first things that I was asked about, I did a sort of early press conference just to introduce myself really. And one of the first things I was asked about was, what are you going to do about safety on our roads? And that surprised me a little bit because normally people ask straight away about crime and burglaries and things like that, but no, it was definitely about safety on the roads, came loud and clear to me. Not that the other issues weren't important to people. But then of course driving to work each day myself, I began to realise that there were a few offenders out there that perhaps needed reminding of what the laws say within the Virgin Islands. So I decided that I needed to do some research, find out what the real issues look like, and with the help of the Department of Motor Vehicles in particular, we began to look at where were the areas that most needed attention. From there, that was when we started to develop and then launch the campaign.
So what did you find that, what areas you found needed most attention?
Well, there was a whole range of things. The most common complaint to me from the public was scooter riders, lack of crash helmets, not adhering to stop lights, weaving in and out of traffic, no seat belts, using a mobile phone, and the one that caught me out, because I wasn't particularly aware of it being an issue here until I arrived, was when the Department of Motor Vehicles started talking about the standard of tint on the windscreens of cars and the fact that people were adding additional tint and that was becoming a safety hazard. So we had this whole basket of road traffic offences that were clearly of concern to a wide range of people. So that was the starting point, was to say, okay, what are we going to do about those things? But I'm a firm believer that you can't prosecute problems away. And I think that you have to start by first saying to people, come on, it's time we all did the right thing for everybody's safety here. So that's why when we launched the campaign, we did a month's education whereby we kind of said we're not going to enforce the law so much, except in the most serious of cases. We'll give you an amnesty, that I called it, where officers will stop you, but they will warn you and advise you about the traffic offences that you may have committed and give you advice about what to do to prevent those offences occurring again. And
you did that during what period of time?
That was the month of July.
Okay.
So
the amnesty is over?
The amnesty is well and truly over, yes. On the 1st of August, we moved into enforcement.
Now, I have one to add to your list, and that is illegal parking. Did that come up?
It did. It came up again in the complaints that the public had made to me. And Road Town itself is not the easiest place to park. We all recognise that. And I can certainly live with people doing their best to park safely, even if it gets a bit crowded. What I find incredible on occasions is that people just park dangerously. junctions. They'll leave half the car sticking out on the main road. I've even seen cars, in particular taxis, parking and stopping in the middle of a roundabout to pick up passengers.
Yes.
You know, that is just reckless behaviour. It's not to be tolerated. And, you know, I think the vast majority of people watching this tonight would just agree with that statement that, come on, people, grow up. You know, let's have a little bit of less selfishness and a bit more consideration for other road users.
So we're going to be seeing more tickets given out. What is the plan for enforcement? Because I don't know how much resources you have to get around to the various areas in the territory where people just stop and park, block traffic, park in the middle of on the street, double park.
Sure.
Have conversations. You know, go into a restaurant or someplace and just
leave the car out there with the engine running. Yes, I've seen it all. Yes.
Yeah. So, and you know, it seems to me like you're going to require quite some resources.
You are right, and to successfully do an enforcement strategy, you've got to increase the number of officers available. And you know, a lot of my officers, bear in mind that this came off of the back of festival, where my officers had already worked 2 weeks of very, very long hours. But a lot of my officers played a really active part by accepting shift changes, by losing days off, and coming in to reinforce the numbers that we needed to make the point that we were trying to make. It's all about safety. You know, I'm not out to keep prosecuting people and just collect revenue. That's not what this is about. But the reality was, and I think there's some interesting figures here, we spent an entire month trying to educate people, and we even produced this booklet, which was done with the assistance of a number of sponsors. And I would like to mention the help that we've had from Caribbean Insurers, the Insurance Store Limited, Nagico Insurance, Colonial Insurance, International Motors, Botanic Service Station and Sol Petroleum. Why do I mention all those people? Because they're all like-minded companies who want to see safety on the roads. So they helped us produce this. Now this booklet contains the road traffic offences for the British Virgin Islands, and it includes all of the fines. So what we did was, having had the help from all of those organisations and individuals, we put the booklet out there, and for that month of education, we were handing this out. And we were saying to people, we were pointing out to people, look, do you realise that if you continue driving without a seatbelt, if you continue driving without a crash helmet, these are the fines that can be imposed on you. They're instant fines, they're endorsement tickets, and in some of the more serious areas, we won't just give you a ticket, we'll actually summons you to go to the local courts to answer for your offences. So having spent a month's education, and we did a lot of media advertising as well to tell people we were doing this, I was really hoping that actually the enforcement stage would reveal that a lot of people had listened and had changed some of their behaviours. However, you know, there's always a downside to an enforcement strategy. If I say to you, for example, that we issued an additional 351 fixed penalty tickets in August for the enforcement stage, 351 people out there just didn't listen.
After the education.
After the education. Yeah. So 351 people didn't listen and got tickets, and a further 57 people have been summoned to appear in court because they didn't listen either. Now, I take no pleasure in quoting those figures because that means that 351 people have had to pay out their hard-earned cash for being silly, and another 50 odd are going to go to court and no doubt get a fine. Hard-earned cash again being paid out. But you know, there's only so much you can do to educate people about road safety. And I don't do this simply because they are the laws of the territory. After all, I don't write the laws. My job is to make sure they're enforced. But I do this because I have a genuine belief that the vast majority of people living here, want to be safe. They want to see other road users abiding by the rules of the road, and they want to know that when they're going on a journey from A to B, they're going to be able to do it safely, securely, and get there in one piece. And I'm afraid when you've got people still behaving recklessly and ignoring the laws of the territory, then enforcement is justified, and those people just have to answer in terms of the payments they'll have to make. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it's good you came on the program because a a lot of times we think that we've done a lot of education, but I didn't know of the road safety initiative until I spoke with Diane Drayton last week. So there are perhaps some persons who still didn't get the message.
And I think that's a fair comment. I
Yeah.
think that's a fair comment.
So-
And you know, I went out and stood by some of my officers while they were doing certain road checks during the enforcement campaign, and I spoke to members of the public. And obviously they recognise you as the commissioner quite quickly, and they say, well, why are you doing this? What's the purpose of it? And you do realise that the message hasn't got out to everyone. So, you know, one of the reasons I was keen to come here on your show is to talk about it, because although tomorrow is August the 31st and we can say, okay, the enforcement campaign is finished, that doesn't mean that the rules no longer apply again and the law is not going to be applied. My officers will be out there continuing to apply road traffic law. And there is no doubt in my mind, based on the success that we've had here and the very positive feedback we've had from a lot of people, even those that have been stopped, there'll be another campaign run. And let me make sure that next time round, I'll make sure I come and see you first.
Well, at least one of the persons that you see,
Yeah.
because there are a number of us that you could take advantage of those opportunities to speak through as well. And I'm sure all the talk show hosts will be happy to have you talk about road and traffic safety. Do you have this book online?
It's not online at the moment, but what we have done is, because of the fact we were sponsored and assisted by all of those companies I've mentioned, we've managed to do a new print of them. We will have those available at the police stations, but eventually we will put it online as well on our police website, so that people can just go and download it and print it off for themselves.
Yeah, because that's what's happening now. You
Yeah.
know, everybody is computer literate, and yes, it's good to get a booklet. But if you have it you'll have it on your phone. You know, you could refer to it and get the information that you need right away. I don't know if we should go into some of the fines for
Sure.
you know, just a few of the common ones, the ones that committed often, and what those fines are, so we could get a sense of how much money you're actually putting out
Sure.
and what those offenses
Well,
are.
I'll talk about, if I may, a couple of the common ones, and then I'll talk about the one that I think is going to surprise everybody. So, failing to stop at a stop sign, you know, your red traffic light, for example.
Well,
You
that
just-
that is a common one.
That's a common one.
Yes.
Well, that's a $50 on the spot fine every time you fail to do that. And you know, everybody does it, because I watch them do it every morning when I go to work. It seems that when people want to turn right on a filter, they don't wait for the green filter arrow. It's still red and they still turn because they see that the other traffic's not coming towards them, so they
Right.
think that's perfectly acceptable.
Right.
It's not. It's a red light. It means stop and wait. So that's $50. Another interesting one, people have asked me what I can do about loud noise, and you often see these vehicles coming along and all the windows are down and the music's playing loud and so on and so forth.
And the street is vibrating.
The street's vibrating. You know, I don't want people to stop having fun, but again, $75 fine on the spot. The one that always sort of seems to come up is when I mentioned earlier on about the use of scooters and people riding without crash helmets. Now, you know, this is a safety issue. It's as simple as that. And it's been told to me time and again here that one of the reasons why people, not just young people, people in general, don't always wear a crash helmet is because of the heat of the Caribbean. You know, and they've
Yes.
said to me, look, Commissioner, you don't understand. You're not from here. It's too hot. It's too sweaty. What price of life is my reply every time? You know, it's a $50 fine. So, okay, you get stopped, $50, you might be able to afford that and you carry on riding. The important point about any of these offences is that, and this happened during the traffic campaign, people were stopped committing offences. They were given an on-the-spot fine and then they would ride on and they'd get stopped again by the next police patrol that we put up the road, because what we did, obviously, we weren't going to say where the police road checks were going to be for obvious reasons, but we did it in a way that we knew that if people were being stopped in one location, they wouldn't have to go too far before they'd see the police again. You get stopped again, you're still riding without a helmet, that's another $50 fine. because it's not continuous. It's not like you've been let off.
So that's $100 in a few minutes.
In a few minutes.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, where that really came home to me was I was with one of my officers when she stopped a motorist, and there were 47 of them who were reported for summons for driving with too high a tint on the windows of their cars, and this is the point I was coming to. And I know this is an issue that Mr. Reimer, the Commissioner of the Department of Motor Vehicles, has a very real concern about. And it is clear in both when you take the driving test, in the road safety manual that you have to learn for that. It's clear in this book, and it talks about percentages that you can have on a screen. But the bottom line for me, to make it easy for the public, is to say this. If you buy a car and it's already got a tint in its windscreen, then that's going to be legal. You start adding bits to it, it's probably going to be illegal. Mm-hmm. And a extreme tint, an illegal tint on your windscreen, $750 fine.
Whoa.
Now, I stood with one of my officers when she'd stopped a motorist in Road Town, and it was quite clear, because we have the devices to test the percentage tint, it was quite clear that it was way too high. And she said, that's it, 750, I'm having to report you. And she said, but I must point out to you now, but if you drive on and get stopped by the police again, by one of my colleagues, and they do the same test, it'll be another $750. So the motorist looked rather despairingly and said, well, what do I do? And the officer said, it's up to you, I'm just pointing out the law. So he actually peeled it off in front of her. Now, there was a lesson learned, because on the spot, we were able to say to people, it's illegal, you can do something about it now, you've stuck it on, take it off, you're not going to keep getting fined. So, I hope that if that motorist is watching tonight, I hope he's reflected and thought, lesson learned.
Well, I suspect, I know I would be reflective. $700 a tint, but they are making tint that is the right requirement.
Correct.
So you don't have to. You have to really go out of your way to buy the illegal tint.
Sure, and there are obviously people here in the territories that are supplying the tint, that are fitting it. I doubt some of it is such a good job, it's so professional. I doubt whether it's a sort of DIY at home. Somebody's making money doing this, but they should know that it's illegal as well, and probably do. And I'm not too old to remember what it was like when I was a youngster with a sports car or a flashy car and wanted to make it look great. I understand that blacked out windows looks cool. I get that, but it's not safe. It's not safe, and it can prevent you from seeing clearly all around for your area of vision as a driver. And it's also not safe for police officers. If I'm asking my officers to go out there and stop people, and they can't see who's in the car as they're stopping it or what they're doing, that creates a high risk situation. Some of my officers are armed. I don't want a situation escalating out of control simply because officers can't see what's going on in a vehicle. So, let's stick to the rule book, let's stick to the law, get your tint off, save yourself some money.
Yes. We got to take a break for a word from our sponsors. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about the scooters, scooter licensing, who can ride scooters, what the requirements are for riding scooters, the age requirements, and the legalities of having a scooter, and what the scooter rules are, if they're different from the vehicle rules. So we're going to take a break for a word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back with Commissioner Michael Matthews after these words from our sponsors.
Spotlight is brought to you by Ocean Conversion BVI Limited and BVI Tourist Board. We are one BVI.
Welcome back to Spotlight. I'm having an interesting conversation, I hope informative, with Commissioner Michael Matthews, and we're talking about road safety. We're going to get to some other things in the next half an hour or so. But before we do that, I wanted to get to talk a little bit more about the scooters, because we have a proliferation of scooters. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. Kids going to school, they can get, because a lot of kids have to stand by the roadside and catch rides or pay for transportation to go back and forth. Sure. We don't have a public transportation system, so it's a good means of transportation for the young people to get to and from their basketball games, their parties, and whatever. But Lord have mercy, they they scare the life out of you. I mean, they scare the life out of me. I'm driving, like boom, and this thing's cutting in front of me, and So, give us some rules about scooters. Scooters have to follow what rules?
Well, first of all, I'm a big supporter of young people getting out on the road on their scooters. I know that sounds weird coming from the Commissioner of Police with all the problems that we've talked about, but you're absolutely right. They need to get around, they need to be able to visit friends, get to school, go shopping, go and do the stuff that young kids do. I just want them to do it safely. Now, there are a few rules, and I appeal at this point in time to parents who are listening to this, because I think there's a lot of parents out there who probably help their youngsters get their first scooter, perhaps even buy it for them. Well, first of all, they've got to be 16 years old. If you're under 16, illegal. You can't ride a scooter on a road. You've got to have a driving licence for it, and you've got to have the scooter itself licensed at the Department of Motor Vehicles. That's where you can also take your test for this scooter riding. And then the various rules that go with it. Of course, you've got to be insured, and any one of those insurance companies that I mentioned earlier on, one of the reasons they're keen to assist with road safety is they don't want uninsured vehicles on the road for obvious reasons. So you've got to go and get yourself insured. So it's license, insurance, crash helmet. And the law says you must wear a safety helmet, and that includes any passenger that you're carrying as well on that scooter. Now, I've even seen just recently, just before the schools broke up, I saw young people being given lifts to school where the scooter rider has got the crash helmet on, and then there's a young school kid on the back, hanging on for dear life with, their school books, no crash helmet, And I'm telling you this factually and honestly, there is not a week gone by since I took up post 4 months ago. I see a daily report of everything that's happened policing-wise in the last 24 hours, and not a week has gone by without there being a scooter involved in an accident with some sort of injury. And that's a terrifying statistic for me. It might just be a small grazed knee or a grazed elbow. Sometimes it's far more serious, and the good nurses and doctors at Peebles Hospital have to do a lot of work to help young people. And we see some terrible injuries here.
Well, that's alarming. A scooter accident every week is alarming for the territory, for a small territory like this.
And that's the point, isn't it? It's a small territory, a small population. And of course, scooters are relatively small machines. And so, the first thing that the scooter riders need to remember is, drivers don't always see them.
Yes.
And if you start weaving in and out of cars and cutting in front of cars, you're not always visible. You're not always going to be seen.
We can't defend for you.
Exactly, exactly. So, it's about getting a good standard of driving on the scooter by learning how to ride it properly and passing your test. It's about making sure you are insured so that if somebody else is injured or you're injured, you're covered. But ultimately, it's about, I'll go back to this common theme, this is about public safety. I am not about giving young people a hard time riding their scooters around the islands here. Good for you, gives you freedom, gives you flexibility, gives you choice. I just want you to do it safely.
Okay, so you got to be 16. You can make an appointment, go down to the motor vehicle department, get a test. I guess you got to learn how to maneuver through some cones or something. I don't know how the test would work.
Yeah, there's different stages to the test, and I think there's a written test first of all.
Okay.
Then I think there's a cone test, and then there's an actual riding test where an examiner will examine you.
And then you get a license for your scooter with insurance.
Correct.
And your helmet, and you're good to go.
You're good to go.
And once you're on the road, you have to obey all the rules of the road that a car would have to obey.
That's absolutely right. I mean,
because a lot of times the scooters just whiz right past the red light or the stop sign, or they just
it doesn't seem to apply to them, does it?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't understand why you would go to all that trouble of paying money out to get a scooter, and it's a valuable asset to you. It gets you around, and then you go and just take stupid risks, like risking jumping a red traffic light and being taken out, and maybe losing a limb or your eyesight or something like that, And this is reality. I haven't come along here this evening to preach. I've been a police officer 35 years. I've picked more bodies out of the road than I've had hot dinners, if I'm honest. I just don't want to see my officers having to continue to attend accidents where it's youngsters, where sometimes the impact of that accident can have life-changing effects on the individual, and stops them doing things later on in life that, you know, the rest of us have always wanted to do and enjoy.
Yeah. Pedestrians, because pedestrians rule the road, and sometimes I know some of us feel like running them over. But whether the pedestrians have any rules that they have to follow and be cautious about and be careful of and be mindful.
Well, a pedestrian should only seek to cross a road when it's safe to do so, you know, and there's some basic sort of rules of thumb, if you like, that you could argue should be applicable to any society, any modern society, which is, you know, you stop at the curb, don't just step out, you know, look left, look right, look left again. When it's safe to cross, you know, cross quickly, cross in a safe place, cross in a well-lit place if it's night time. You know, they're the basic rules. What always surprises me, though, is that people don't seem to have a regard for their own safety. You know, sitting outside the studio is a dual carriageway, and whilst there is a speed limit there, it's only 20, still at 20, you can get a serious injury if you're hit by a car coming at you. You know, a solid chunk of metal travelling at 20, hitting a soft fleshy bit with some bones, you're going to come second. And yet you see it all the time, don't you? People sort of see the cars coming at them, and it's almost sort of like they're waiting to the last possible minute to let the car get as close as possible before they step out, you know. And it's happened to me personally, you know, you slam the brakes on, and then they look at you as if to say, what's your problem?
You were supposed to stop, yes.
You know.
Yes, you were supposed to stop.
Now, of course, there are places where vehicles must give way, and there are plenty of pedestrian crossings marked out here in Road Town and elsewhere in the territories. And, you know, once a pedestrian puts their foot on the zebra crossing, vehicles must stop and give way. But again, most mornings, if you're travelling into Road Town like me every day, you'll see vehicles stopped right on the zebra crossing, right on the pedestrian crossing. So even if somebody wanted to cross, they can't because there's a vehicle in its way. You must either stop short before the crossing or stop after the crossing. You're not supposed to park on it.
Okay. Now, you talk about the speed limit being 20 miles on a dual carriageway. You know that none of us obey that.
Well, I hope you're not admitting that to me now.
I'm pleading guilty right now.
I've got my ticket book in the car.
I'm pleading guilty right now. But I mean, is that something now that we are going to be enforcing the 20 mile speed limit? Because that's way too slow.
Well, you know, I think, as I said earlier, I don't make the laws of the territory. My job is purely to enforce them. But as the Commissioner of Police, what I do, of course, have is the privilege to be able to speak to lawmakers, you know, to the government, to Cabinet, to the Premier, and discuss those very issues. And, you know, and where something comes up like that, where it's obvious that actually it's impeding the flow of traffic, I see no reason why I shouldn't ask, you know, the government's consent to review some of those things. You know, it's not 20 deliberately, you know, to be too slow, but it may have been appropriate at the time when it was first put there. And maybe times change, but you know, you are right. Most people don't seem to stay on the speed limit, and I suppose the point being is that now that the public have made it clear to me that they see one of my key duties as enforcing traffic laws, well, anything's possible. Maybe we will be setting up speed traps. You know.
Okay. Now the police engagement with the public, a lot of times, well, not a lot of times, but sometimes the police will stop you and give you a ticket, or to give you a ticket, or for some other reason. How that relationship should work? When an officer stops you, what should he do? How should you respond to avoid conflict, to avoid hostility, de-escalate tension, so that there's a fair exchange of whatever needs to be done during that particular period?
Well, I mean, you know, first of all, you're talking about sort of like, you know, common courtesy. The first thing I'd say is that the public should never fear being stopped by a police officer, unless you've got something to hide, of course. You know, most people that do fear the police have normally done something wrong. Your average member of the public who's law-abiding has got nothing to fear from my officers. But I fully accept, and I certainly do not approve, that there are a small minority of officers who are not courteous, who are in fact rude. abrupt and confrontational. And I'm going to work very hard with my senior managers to educate my own officers about that. Because in answer to your question, the first thing I expect is my officers to be polite. Polite but firm when it comes to the law. They should be informative in terms of explaining why they've stopped the vehicle, what it is they believe the driver has done, if they believe an offence has occurred, or if they've got a suspicion of something, and explain it clearly, explain what the law states, and explain their powers. But most of all, you see, for me, the officers that are out there on patrol, when they're stopping vehicles, or even if they just stop people on the street to talk to them, they're my shop window. They're my front window to the public. And if my front window is advertising an arrogant, obnoxious, rude police service, then that will be the view of the public towards the police. They'll just say, well, all of your officers are rude, we've got no confidence in you, and therefore if public confidence reduces, then I'm not going to get cooperation, and indeed policing by consent, as we do, becomes questionable. So I want to encourage my officers to continue to do the excellent work they do, and I've got to say the vast majority are very hardworking, very polite, very knowledgeable, good officers. The odd one that lets us down, we need to grip, and we need to challenge that behaviour, and we need to point out why that behaviour is not acceptable in a modern day police service.
Yeah. But I have to say that I haven't found one rude policeman yet. And,
I'm pleased to hear that.
Yeah, and I've been stopped quite a few times, particularly if you're not wearing my seatbelt.
Shame on you. It's a $50 fine.
It's a $50 fine, yeah. So, but they always seem to be polite. I don't know if it's because of, because sometimes it's what you give off.
Yeah.
If you're polite.
Of course,
Yeah.
and if you approach a situation, it's common sense, isn't it? If you approach a situation in a hostile way, you're going to get a hostile reception back. Now, of course, it doesn't always work, and I've seen some of our best officers being polite, going in, trying to speak to people, and have still received a hostile reception. But that's human nature for you on occasion. Sometimes people have just had a bad day, including some of my officers.
Yeah. Now, as far as arrest and particularly with young people, when they are stopped for offenses, and so for example, if you stop a person for a traffic violation and you might smell marijuana in the car,
Yeah.
right? How does that procedure work, and what rights do you have as an officer, and what rights does the individual have in that regard?
Okay. Well, first of all, the powers to stop a vehicle on a road basically come from the road traffic legislation, and a police officer in uniform can stop a vehicle if it's being driven on a public road. So that's your sort of power to stop the vehicle. It's in the legislation. If you then suspect other offences have occurred by persons in that vehicle, you only have to have what they call reasonable suspicion. And you've just given a great example. If you can smell marijuana, that's reasonable suspicion to then search the persons in that vehicle and that vehicle itself to see if there are other offences, for example, under the Misuse of Drugs Act. So, you might be stopped for one reason under the traffic laws, and then find that there's a criminal law that kicks in once the officer forms that necessary suspicion.
Okay, and so you have the right to search, and how should the person react in that situation? Because I imagine that that'd be a high tension situation.
Well, you know what? I would argue that probably most of the time, in a situation where, say, we're talking about a bit of marijuana, most of the time people hold their hands up to it. Most of the time people just go, all right, yeah, sorry, officer, I was smoking, and they'll hand it over. And then, we've got a range of options open to us that go from summons to court all the way through to a police caution, depending on the amount that is found and so forth. Where I think you get the tension, of course, is that sometimes you don't get the smell of marijuana, but what you do get is a suspicion because of the behaviour of the individuals, or they're not cooperating, or they're being obstructive. And if you have nothing to hide, then why would you stop cooperating with the police? Why would you be obstructive to what the police officer is trying to do? Because all the police officer is trying to do is enforce the laws of the territories. So that can be a tension situation. Now, officers are trained to be effective communicators. You know, we expect them to be able to de-escalate tension, not escalate it, not make matters worse, but make matters better. But again, sometimes, you know, especially when officers are few in number, they sometimes have to take firm action to deal with hostility.
Yeah. Well, I'm asking because I've noticed that quite a bit of young people are smoking these days, and I'm concerned about the criminalization
Yeah.
of young people,
Yeah.
especially young men,
Yeah.
and having the blemish on their record that's going to impact them for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of happy to hear you say that there's some discretion. The officer has some discretion in whether they arrest and proceed to prosecute, or just say, listen, just give you a talking to, or confiscate the.
In most cases, probably an arrest will take place, but it's the outcome. It's whether you actually end up standing before the court or not, or whether you are cautioned by the police and released without going to a court. Is the point I'm making? But I do strongly agree with you that there is a major risk of decriminalising young people. And I don't think that's unique to the territory. I think that's across the world now, and we need to change that. Now, there's a good news story here. I've had the pleasure already of meeting our new Director of Public Prosecutions, who only started this week, and we've already had some early conversations about what the criminal justice system could look like in the future. And one of those things I'm interested in looking at is diversion policies, where we divert, in particularly young people, young offenders, away from the courts, and perhaps look at community sentences as an option, where somebody gives something back to the local community rather than get a fine or a criminal record.
A criminal record, yes.
Yeah, because a criminal record can be extremely damaging to a person's life. What might have been a minor incident in that person's own mind might become a major issue to them later on in life. And I've seen it many, many times where young people have got caught doing something silly, and then later on, for example, want to join the police and suddenly find their application can't be taken forward because they got a criminal record, something like that. Or they want to do a university course, and then somebody points out you're not a person of good character, and so on and so forth. I've seen these things happen around the world. I can't speak for locally here with any level of expertise, other than to say, if we can find ways to ensure that we don't go down the path of always criminalising young people, then I think we should go out of our way to look at that and find alternatives to the court system where appropriate.
Okay, but as a commissioner, can you say to officers, listen, try your best to mitigate the situation without having to go through that full process if the opportunity exists? Well,
I have to have confidence and trust in all of my officers, because every police officer throughout the world has that discretion available to them. Now, the law is the law, and any legal people listening to this will say, the law is black and white. It's either an offence or it isn't an offence. But I just think we have to be realistic. This is 2016, and if some of my officers are using discretion out there on occasions, they're not going to get into a great deal of difficulty with me if at the end of the day it's the right decision that means that something minor has been dealt with by education and maybe a telling off on an occasion.
You save a kid's life.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it, because that's becoming an increasing concern of mine. I remember one day we had 46 young people before the courts.
Yeah.
And I just imagine what happens when that young person realizes, hey, I'm making a mistake here, and I have made a mistake here, and I need to turn my life around, only to find that it's not as easy as they might think. And so, and I wanted you to say tonight to young people that they need to be careful, with the law and breaking the law and the things that they're doing.
Well, earlier today I was in a meeting with two of our very hard-working magistrates here in Road Town, and there is no doubt about it that they are not short of work. They're very, very busy people. Their staff are very busy people, and there is a steady flow going through our courts. That's nothing to be proud of. And as I say, I don't write the laws, my office is there to enforce them. But if we can find alternative ways, in agreement with the Director of Public Prosecutions, to just decriminalise some of the things that kids do when they're young and silly, then we should seriously look at it.
Yeah. Well, that brings me to my outreach question, my police outreach question. I know I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I'm from the BVI,
Yeah.
but I went to New York when I was 15 years old and grew up in actually in the projects in Brooklyn, crime and drug infested area. And there was an oasis in the middle of the projects, a community center,
Yeah.
where the Brooklyn Police Department had the police athletic league, where they had in the baseball season, they had little league baseball teams. I used to be a catcher on a little league baseball team. In the winter season, they had little league football teams, and it's called the PAL. And kids could join up, and after school you get help with your homework. And so I'm thinking about, do you have any plans, perhaps in terms of in relationship to community policing,
Yep.
to have police outreach where
Yep.
the police help to channel the energies of young people in a different direction?
Well, I have a very, very good community policing team at the moment, but it's not big enough. I want to increase the size of it, and in fact, that was one of the arguments I made to government about allowing my recruiting plan to move forward so that I can increase the number of officers in the force, and one of the priorities will be to increase the number of community officers. But to give you a flavour of some of the work that's going on at a community level, just one example, out on Virgin Gorda, I was discussing with officers over there just last week. There's an area out at the front of the police station there which has been levelled, and they're going to put some bitumen on it. And what they're going to do is they're going to create a basketball court there for young people, and they've also put up a whiteboard for a outdoor cinema. They've got some local business people involved who are helpfully coming forward and offering funding and resource to build this in the first place, and then the officers themselves are going to give their own time to do coaching and attract young people to come there and almost act like a youth centre outside the police station. Now, I am absolutely 100% for that. I want police officers wearing this uniform to not just be enforcers of the law. I want them to also be encouragers for young people to grow up in a way that's going to benefit them, because that's going to benefit everybody in the future, and that is part of policing. Policing a community isn't just about the serious end of the business. Yes, we've got to do that. We've got to keep the community safe. That's a key role, very, very important. When you go home to bed tonight, you need to know that the police are out there keeping an eye on you. But equally, there's the whole education process, and police officers are very adept at doing that. And as I say, I've been extremely impressed in the short time I've been here with the community team here in particular, and I'm keen to see them expand and grow their activities.
Okay, we fall under the tyranny of the clock. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about your vision, and perhaps you've already spoken to some of that vision, but coming to the Virgin Islands, taking up your post, looking and doing a little investigation yourself about the environment, what are some of your goals and your vision and some of your goals for policing the BVI and for creating a safe environment for everyone?
Well, I suppose the starting point is before you create a vision, you have to sort of recognise what's happened thus far. What's the story so far? I arrived and found that the force hadn't been able to recruit a full-time commissioner. My deputy, Mr. Alwyn James, had been the acting commissioner for a period of time. He'd done a great job. But then they sought to recruit somebody who then turned it down at the last minute and had to go through the whole process again. So that created confusion and anxiety around the leadership of the force. There was a corruption inquiry that resulted in officers being arrested. There'd been a lack of investment in the force since about 2011. And so what I inherited was a decline in budget, declining resources, poor equipment, poor standard of vehicles, very poor standard of police stations. So I sit there and I think to myself, well, it would have been silly to have come all this way and had nothing to do. So I've got plenty to think about in terms of vision. But I could sum it up very quickly by saying I want to build on the great work that's been done here by my predecessors, and that's all of my predecessors. There's some very good work that's been done to modernise and bring the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force up to a standard that's acceptable at the international level. But there's still plenty more to do. So I want to build on that work. I want to take the force forward, and I want to be able to get to a stage where I have very well trained, very well equipped officers who are proud to do their job and whom the communities are proud of. Now, that isn't the case at the moment, and I'm the first to accept it, that there are people out there who don't trust the police. People won't come forward with information because of that lack of trust, and there are serious offences happening on occasions that frighten people. So I want us to have the ability to have a police service in the future that is trusted, that is committed, and that does keep people safe, and really does keep people safe, which means, and that's my vision statement, which means we've got to deal robustly with those who decide to commit the most serious offences here, and that involves people with firearms, people dealing with the importation of drugs, people stealing and robbing. Let's deal robustly with those few individuals that are making life a misery for the vast majority who live here. And let's be frank, it always is a minority that make the rest of our lives a misery. But in dealing robustly with that sort of thing, I need to also build up community confidence in local policing. And that will come through greater visibility, greater trust, and greater confidence in policing. So the start is we increase our numbers over the coming months with the great assistance that's being provided by government now. You're going to see new vehicles rolling out. And today, and this is the first time I've had the opportunity to mention it, we've just been donated 3 very fast, powerful, what I call off-road motorcycles for our roads policing team. A willing member of the public come forward, wants to support policing, they're virtually brand new, is donating them to the force, so that will allow officers to go further, quicker, and be able to actually respond faster to people's needs in certain circumstances. Plus the new vehicles that we're going to bring online in the next few months, you'll start to notice more vehicles because there'll be properly marked vehicles with proper blue lights and sirens on them, so people can see and hear and feel that the police are about. It was said to me by one of our government officials, when the boat comes in at the pier with all the tourists, that's great for the economy, but when all those tourists tip off the boat, how safe do they feel in the British Virgin Islands? Well, thankfully we are one of the safest territories in the whole of the Caribbean, but we've got to stay that way. And part of feeling safe is about seeing visible officers about, and part of that visibility is about seeing the police car or the officer in uniform there, on duty and available.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for coming on Spotlight.
Thank you for your time.
Don't be a stranger, and come anytime you're welcome.
That's very kind of you. Thank you. It's been a wonderful opportunity to meet you tonight, and I'd love to come back again. Thank you.
Certainly. Yes, indeed. It was a fascinating conversation with Commissioner Michael Matthews, the new commissioner, 4 months old, here in the Virgin Islands, and he's got great plans. And hopefully, as a people, we cooperate and make our territory safe for us, ourselves particularly, and of course for our invited guests as well. Spotlight is seen every Tuesday here at 8 p.m. on JTV Channel 55 and rebroadcast on Tuesdays at 2:30 p.m. Watch Spotlight on demand at jtvlive.net, like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Spotlight BVI. Catch up with all the latest spotlights and check for upcoming guests and topics. I'm Edjuenka, reminding you that when the spotlight is on, you see the facts. Peace and blessings.
Spotlight is brought to you by CCT BVI, Life Unlimited, and the National Bank of the Virgin Islands, the official Bank of Paradise.